What's up, guys? We're back with a movie review, and of the three action movies, thriller movies that came out, this was another one.
Yeah, I feel like we're on a trend right now. We've seen basically the same type of movie so far this year, but it's fine because we have something cool to compare it to. But we are here for Wrath of Man. This is Guy Ritchie's latest movie. It's got Jason Statham as like the main star. You got a bunch of different other actors in here that I do really like as well. But this is kind of like it's got sort of like a mystery to it. I don't want to say, I say that lightly because it's not really the biggest, it's not like intentionally hidden to the point where like, oh, you're supposed to find out at the very end. It's like one of those things where it's like, they set it up there that there is something more at play with the plot, and then you can kind of guess it if you're paying attention or if you're looking for it, but then it's revealed pretty early on in the film, and then it's just that coming to head for the rest of the film. So it does have more of a thriller vibe, I would say. It does have a crime element. It still labels it as an action thriller, which I still scratch my head at, because while there is action, I wouldn't say it's not balls to the walls action like maybe some of the other movies we reviewed this year, but there still is a nice level of action for those that are looking for that sort of thing.
Yeah, so in this genre, we get a lot of revenge films, and that is a theme in a lot of movies, including this one. Jason Statham plays the main character in this movie, and I think he does really well portraying his role as a person and kind of his role as a force to be reckoned with, or not. But yeah, there's a lot. There's some really cool. So the plot revolves around an armored car. So we have some really cool scenes where it's quiet all of a sudden, especially the opening of the movie. It's quiet, and then something happens really dramatic,
right,
very quickly.
I do like that after we get like the first, dare I say, conflict, or like, we got the thing that's going to kick off the story element. It does kind of tone back a little bit, and we do get the slower moments and like the quieter scenes. Is a lot of like, building up the characters and like the relations that they are like. There's a lot of like workplace drama that you get at the beginning part. It's kind of Jason Statham's first day on the job that we see for after like the first 10 minutes, it goes on for like 20 minutes there, and then from the first day it kind of progresses like weeks and months him at this place, and until we get to like the second act of the film, then it kind of goes back and explains kind of the in-between there. But I do like those moments a lot. I think at the beginning part of the film there definitely is a lot of time that yes, there's not like very explosive things happening, but it's just as like entertaining and intriguing to watch because there's so much charisma between all of the actors, and I think the characters are written in an intriguing way that you're just like wanting to see more of them and kind of where it's leading. So I do think the interwovenness of the dialogue and the things associated with it are very enjoyable. It does get into dare I say, typecasting for Jason Statham. I think at the beginning part of the movie, they do kind of play it as like, oh, he might be playing a semi-different character than he typically plays, but it kind of does eventually end up where he typically, stays in films, which I can't complain because he does a very good job at it. It is something that's, you kind of come to expect, but I do wish there was a little bit more to it than just what we got. But I will say the biggest thing I enjoyed probably of the film, which you can jump in here, Michael, to say if it's any different, but I think for a movie kind of like this where you do have like an action element to it, and you do have two forces that are going to go toe-to-toe in a physical altercation, and one of them seemingly has a quote-unquote justifiable reason for ensuing all this carnage, or you have an element to him that leads him to be in some ways more relatable, or at least draw some sort of sympathy from the audience. While that is there, and it does play on that, very simple beat, I do like the fact that Jason Statham is not your typical like good hero like action guy in this. There is definitely a element, like a dark element to him, and it's not necessarily a good guy versus a bad guy, or a good guy getting revenge on a bad guy. It's kind of like both bad guys, just in this world that, you know, stuff happens, and like it's a very selfish journey for getting some form of justice, even though I don't think the character necessarily is in the business of justice.
Yeah, with these kind of films, I think it's pretty... I don't want to compare this one to John Wick as much as we did with Nobody, because there is some genre differences and just kind of the feel of the movie is different. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that's very important with these movies is having a fulfilling finale and kind of an ending as well. Mm-hmm. And I think that this movie really picks up in the finale. I really like the final set piece where we have all this action take place. I think it's pretty cool. And we do have some interesting character development during the finale. Josh talked a little bit about it already. In the second act, they go and explain a lot of things. I think that probably went maybe 5 minutes too long. I feel like it did, it did in some ways serve as an exposition dump instead of just like showing through actions. Yeah,
there's like it's not necessarily a bad thing in films. I think in certain circumstances it is done very interestingly, where you have the same scene in like one part of the movie, and you can tell there's other stuff happening in the scene, but you're not visually seeing it. And then later in the film, you see the same scene play out, but from a different perspective. And that's kind of the approach they take in part of the second act. And I did like it a lot, but it is one of those things where like you can kind of piece together that, like the stuff that we see from that perspective the second time by the time we're done with the first act. So I do agree with you. It is kind of redundant in that sense. There is kind of like some other things in there that's like, okay, did we really need this to draw to that conclusion?
One of the probably the key example where I was like, do we really need two? There was like 2 or 3 interrogation scenes that didn't serve a major purpose to me in the second act. That was part of the backstory that I was like, there's same. There's a scene with the wife that I think was like not super impactful for me personally. But overall, I like the flow of the movie. It had some really nice scenes, both in cars and out of cars. Mm-hmm. And then one of the elements that we haven't talked about much is it really does have a action star cast in a way that these faces, but you can see them realistically being action stars, and not in it's a bunch of guys getting together, more like, oh, this guy's going to be a problem if we're going to try to kill him.
Yeah, I do like that it does have a more... I'm not to say that they're, like any film, you do put in some forms of like jokes or comedy, because in real life, like, people do that, so... but it doesn't feel like a movie in that sense. It just feels like a depiction of real life, and I do like that translates throughout all of its film, whether that's just with the dialogue or with the threat base. I think the like Michael said earlier, kind of the set pieces, or maybe just the setting of like being a like a security company, or like people that specialize in transferring the money from place to place, I think is actually a really cool thing for kind of an action thriller, because you see so many times that be an element in some action movie where like they're always hitting the tanks or the trucks, and it is kind of cool to see it from a different perspective. It's kind of a flip on that, and I can't think of a movie I've seen it kind of take the centerpiece, so it was kind of nice having that different perspective throughout the film too.
Yeah, the only other real critique I have of the film is there are some really dumb deaths when you look at it that don't hold up in the finale. Yeah. There's like some... it's not a spoiler because it's not a major character, but there's one death where this guy is going against like some really heavily armed people with a pistol that can't necessarily lethally harm one of these guys, and he's still revealing his position and gets killed pretty rapidly. And there was a little bit of that in the finale that kind of took me out of the scene a little bit. But besides that, I think the shooting and just the gunplay that they did have in the movie which wasn't a ton, but the gunplay they did have was executed pretty well.
Yeah, I think there's I don't know, it's like one of those where it's more so a different opinion, or like maybe the a different style of approach of what you're going for. I think with the finale there is some moments where characters, it's kind of like I was sitting there questioning it, like, would somebody really do that? Like, there's multiple scenes where like characters are, they're under fire, or like they don't know where the enemy is at, and there's seemingly allies calling out to them, and they kind of let their guard down. And it's, I don't know, like, you could argue probably either way, but I was kind of sitting there questioning a couple times where, like, would this guy really just step out when they heard their voice? I don't know. I think you would still be surveying, making sure nobody's like coming up to them, or like, actually using that as a ploy. So I don't know. That's just a little thing. But overall, I did really enjoy the film. I think it's not my favorite film of the year. I think I still have to give that to Nobody, because it's just like a very entertaining movie. But this was definitely one that I would rank higher up there out of the Statham films that I've seen. And it's got a great supporting cast. What can I say? It
has some fun people that you'll see over the course of the movie. So, yep. Yeah, the thing about this movie is I think it's not as rewatchable as something like a John Wick or a Nobody, just because there's not a ton of like awesome things that you're going to see. It's more like you're going along for a ride, and it was an enjoyable one, and now you're moving on to something else. Yeah, the story takes centerfold, and it's like one of those things that if you really love it, that'll probably inflict how much you rewatch it. I think the only thing I have to say in closing is that two things. One, everybody wishes they had a boss like the guy that works at that owns that security company. And two, this is probably the best Scott Eastwood movie I can recollect. I normally see him in such terrible movies, but I think he actually was really good in this. And as kind of like more of the main villain, I did like seeing him kind of in that role as well. But with that being said, Michael, what is your final verdict for this one? So I'm going to give this one a gotta have it. I found it very enjoyable. I liked watching it, and it's still one of the best. It's one of the best movies in a year that didn't have very many good movies. So it's worth a watch if you have the time, and get some mozzarella sticks like I did when I was having it. It was a pleasant experience.
Well, my rating's the same as Michael's. I just really enjoyed the film, and I'm just pleasant that now that movies are starting to come back, we haven't really had any stinkers. Like, all of them have been solid or above average. So really been pleasing with the ride that we have, and hopefully the rest of the movies we have going forward will be up to this or better. And yeah, we'll be back for the next movie review, I'm sure. Don't know what that will be, but stay tuned and we'll be back. So anyway, guys, we'll see you next time.
Later.
Peace.